I'm a love child. At least my mother told me I was a love child. My parents were hippies. And my weekends were spent in the Oregon Coast Range, foraging for plants, identifying birds, picking mushrooms. Not that kind of mushrooms. My parents were hippies because they weren't irresponsible. My brother and I hated it. We wanted to be at home playing with our Legos, watching cartoons. But my mother loved nature. In fact, she loved sharing nature with others. My father was a caregiver. He was an intensive care nurse at the ICU unit at the Veterans Administration Hospital here in Portland. He took care of some of the sickest patients they had, and he watched many of them die. But to this day, he will say that it was his privilege to be of service at the end of someone's life. These are the values that I was raised with. Understand the world around you, protect the world around you, and try to be of service. Make the place better than you found it. So after a brief stint, 4 years at the University of Oregon, what does the love child do next? Well, somewhat predictably, I became a Peace Corps volunteer. I went to southern Honduras in 1997 to work on potable water projects for villages. Now, calling these villages was probably a gross overstatement. These were communities of 10 to 15 families, either in the middle of nowhere or right alongside the Pan American Island. I had no idea what I was doing. I was armed with that idealism that I had been brought up with, that desire to have an impact, some really mediocre Spanish, and trying to navigate a world that was brand new to me. A new language, new food, new culture, avoiding men with automatic weapons, and bugs, so many bugs. 3 times I got stung by scorpions in my time. But despite all of those barriers, we actually were able to get a few things done. And how gratifying is it to see fresh water, potable water being brought to communities that had never had it before? The impact was really inspiring. The impact on people's lives and children's health, I actually felt like I was doing something worthy of my upbringing. In November of 1998, Hurricane Mitch parked on Honduras for 4 days straight. It killed more than 11,000 people. It destroyed nearly all of the infrastructure, including every single one of those water projects. The violence of the storm was unbelievable. It mutilated livestock. It wiped entire communities off the map. I was exhausted, demoralized. I had spent days in mud up to my hips, helping my friends and colleagues try to extract what few worldly possessions they had left. I was told to go to the Salvadoran border because we were going to evacuate. So I made my way overland, hiking, walking, all across rivers. Eventually made it there and was evacuated to Panama. And after several days of very heavy drinking, I decided it was time to go home. I was only a few months from the end of my commitment, but I was done. I was tired of the bureaucracy. I was a little scared. But that plane ride home was really long because I felt like I had failed. Probably more accurately, I felt like I had quit. And maybe I deserved the opportunity to go home. It was always going to be a temporary assignment. But I thought of the people that I left behind and the work that had been destroyed. And so when I arrived back in Portland, sitting in my parents' basement in Scappoose, Oregon, I felt helpless. But it presented itself as a choice. I could wallow, which I had done a pretty good job of, or I could find another way to express that idealism that was still in me. So I became the part-time executive director of a Latino gang intervention nonprofit. I know you look at me and go, oh yeah, that totally fits. Again, I had no idea what I was doing. A friend who was the chair of the board asked me to take this role. But I didn't understand the ecosystem. I didn't understand these kids particularly well. My Spanish was way better than it was 2 years prior, but that wasn't it. And frankly, I probably didn't have the patience to learn what it took to actually drive change. I just got engaged. My wife and I were talking about starting a family, and I felt like I needed to get a real job. So in 1999, I went to work for Nike as a footwear quality analyst. And I kind of felt like a little bit of a sellout. It's not what a love child does. The child of hippies doesn't go to work for the man. But there it was. But I saw the way to make this work. 1999 was the early days of the sweatshop controversy for Nike. And I thought, I got this. That controversy started in northern Honduras. I knew the country, I knew the language, I knew the players, I knew the culture. I felt like I could really help. I was eminently qualified to do this. So with my tail between my legs, I dove into being a footwear quality analyst. Again, having no idea what I was doing. There's a little bit of theme here. I was right in the middle of how product was engineered, designed, marketed, manufactured. I had to go to Asia, to Vietnam, China, Indonesia, to see how these products were actually made, how the wheels of the machine turned to actually grow a company at that size. While I was still working at Nike, I went back and got my MBA here at Portland State. And I started to understand financial dynamics, accounting worked, strategy, those kinds of things. That led to other jobs. There was still that idealism in me. I knew somehow it had to come out. There was some way I had to express that desire to have an impact. But I had to sit tight. I wound up leading the sourcing and supply planning team for apparel. Now that's a wonky corporate term for the team that decides which factories make what stuff, which factories make hoodies, which factories make t-shirts. And part of the framework that we developed to decide to make those decisions included sustainability. Cost, quality, could they deliver? Could they actually make the stuff we want them to? And could they do it sustainably? And the light bulb went on. I was finally in a position where I could blend this desperate need, the idealistic need to have an impact while helping grow a business, to do the right thing at the same time. In 2013, I had the opportunity to go to Vietnam. I moved my wife, myself, my children of 5, 7, and 9 to Ho Chi Minh City, Vietnam. Massive leap of faith for my wife. She had never been across the Pacific Ocean. And man, was I feeling it from a career standpoint. This was it, right? I was the most senior person in the country. I met with the president. We were hosting congressional delegations. I was managing a team of hundreds. I was feeling myself a little bit. But the cool thing about it was that, again, I finally started to have this opportunity to integrate sustainability in just the daily operational rhythm of the company. We were meeting with factories talking about capacity expansion, how many units did they produce, but we were also talking about solar arrays on their roofs, recycling infrastructure in the country to support the waste that they generated. Then in 2014, the Chinese government moved an oil rig into Vietnamese territorial waters. Now, if you know anything about that part of the world, the South China Sea is very hotly contested. Multiple countries lay claim to certain parts of that territory. And that move was inflammatory at the least to the Vietnamese people. That anger manifested itself in riots. There were roving gangs of thousands of motorbikes attacking what they perceived to be Chinese-owned businesses, looting, vandalizing, burning, including a number of Lakeland factories. Now, the hurricane was tough, don't get me wrong. But I was really only concerned about myself in 1998. In 2014, I had a team of hundreds of people I was responsible for. I had a family. The threat was real to life and to property. We chose to evacuate all of the staff of Chinese descent for their safety. There was a point at which I thought I had to evacuate my own family for their safety. This was spiraling. Fortunately, it calmed down. And beyond some burned factories and a lot of damage, there wasn't significant fallout. And we were able to clean up and get back to work, doing the things that we had done before. In 2016, I went back to the United States, get back here to Portland, and became the vice president of responsible supply chain. I share that because it felt like a moment of vindication for me. 17 years prior, nobody would give me the time of day when it came to that topic. And here I was leading the function. He was really proud of himself for sticking with it. In 2018, I had the opportunity to become Chief Sustainability Officer. And it felt like a dream come true. I don't know that I ever would have had that in my vision 20 plus years prior, but in that moment, it felt like this is where I was meant to be. I had accumulated all of this experience in all these different parts of the company, all those previous crises I had lived through. felt like prepared me for this. And as you all know, big companies make lots of commitments in this space. They're going to be more sustainable. They're going to reduce their carbon footprint. They're going to reduce their waste footprint. And I knew that we had to operationalize sustainability. It had to be embedded in the company in order for those things to actually have a chance of becoming true. So we developed a strategy, we socialized the strategy with the board of directors, the CEO, everybody was on board. Then COVID happened. And you can imagine when everybody's in lockdown, the executive leadership of the team is not really thinking about sustainability. They're thinking about how do we run a company on Zoom. But we've got into a rhythm. And what was interesting about that particular crisis, at least as it related to sustainability, was that it was an opportunity. People began to see clear skies in Los Angeles for the first time in years. Clear skies in Mumbai for the first time in years. Now, lockdowns are not the way you're going to get to the resolution of the climate crisis, but at least demonstrated the possibility. What was actually possible? What could it look like? We got it right. So as things normalized, we got back into an operating rhythm for the business. We were able to use that as fuel. I guess consumers cared about it, its employees cared about it, of course I and my team, we all cared. But we also knew that we had to integrate with a business, a really big one at that. And so we had to find those places where there was an intersection of incentive. Where does it overlap between business growth and profitability and sustainability? I'll give you a couple of examples. Transportation. In the apparel and footwear industry, most product is transported either by boat or by plane. If you transport something on a boat, yeah, it takes longer, no question. It's also significantly cheaper and way less carbon intensive. So we started to see how those things overlap. Now, there was still product that went on planes because sometimes it just had to be there faster. But once we started to integrate sustainability as part of the decision-making criteria, it started to get some momentum. We started to see things like packaging initiatives in Europe. The European logistics team realized that if they downsized the boxes for individual digital orders, they could get more orders in a truck, which meant a lower cost per unit and a lower carbon footprint per unit. So that efficiency complemented sustainability, and again, the flywheel kept turning. 80+% of the carbon footprint in that industry comes from two places: materials and the energy that it takes to convert those materials into finished goods. Think power grids in Vietnam or oil and polyester. Which meant that we were going to have to invent replacement materials. Now, there was one example that gave me a little bit of hope: recycled polyester. Now, some of you are going to say that, yeah, it's a terrible example. It's not perfect by any stretch of the imagination, but at the time it was one of the few more sustainable materials at scale. Nike first used recycled polyester in a garment in the 2000 Sydney Olympics. It used to hang in one of the buildings on campus. It was a singlet, running singlet, for an athlete for the Portugal national team. And if you were to see this garment, you would say, how in God's green earth did anybody wear that on the highest level of competition? The color was weird. It looked like it was made from shredded water bottles. It could not have been comfortable. But fast forward 2+ decades, Nike became the biggest consumer of recycled polyester in the industry, demonstrating the impact at scale. Now, something will have to replace that material. We have to get better, no question. There are lots of really cool things out there. Some innovations that are incredible. Leather made out of mushrooms. They're made out of pineapple. Fabric made out of banana fiber. Chemical recycling of garments. Literally, a garment goes into a vat of chemicals and comes out as the depolymerized version of itself, ultimately becomes yarn and a garment. Plastic made from captured methane from pig farms and defunct coal mines, fed to a naturally occurring bacteria in the Pacific Ocean, makes the feedstock for what ultimately becomes plastic. These are really, really cool, and by far one of the most fun part of my last job. But they're not ready for commercial scale. And we can't take 20 years to get there. But patience is important. The ability to iterate and innovate and persevere is incredibly important. So, as I end a 25-year career at one place, living in the same ecosystem for half my life. What does the love child do next? No idea. But I know that that idealism is still in my core. I know that that drive to have an impact is still there. And I've learned a couple of things along the way. There are some things that you cannot control. There are things that will steer you off course in the most violent way sometimes, and will test your resolve. You will persevere. And sometimes those things actually provide a little bit of a propellant down your path. You have to work within the system, especially a big corporate system, to drive change. Solutions have to contemplate the context of the organization you're attempting to make. Patience, commitment are critical. It may take 20 years to find the solution. We don't want to give ourselves that much time. We want to be urgent, but you have to be patient. And so as you all invent, invest, innovate, iterate on those innovations, and attempt to scale them, I feel that if we pay attention to those lessons, we might actually change the world.